I'm Robert Ramsay. I'm an agricultural consultant with SAC working out of Auchencruive. I'm here today in Lanarkshire looking at a field of deferred grass. Suckler cow margins have been under pressure for generations, and we're always looking to control costs, and the biggest challenge is that cost of the winter. Particularly in the southwest of Scotland, we look at we have a particularly long winter period, often in excess of 6 months, and farmers are increasingly looking at ways of reducing that winter housing period. We've seen in recent years a move towards forage crops, looking at kale, turnips and fodder beet as a means to shorten or exclude that winter housing period altogether. However, there is another winter option, another outwintering option that's often overlooked, and that is deferred grazing. It's becoming more popular, but certainly it's an option for many farms. In fact, most farms across the country can take advantage of deferred grass. So what is deferred grazing? Quite simply, it's grass that we haven't eaten yet. So we can make use of deferred grazing all throughout the grazing season, simply by dropping a paddock out. It suits rotational systems very well, and it actually allows us to maintain pasture quality throughout the whole rotation. By dropping out a couple of paddocks at peak growth time, we maintain the grazing pressure on the rest of the platform. This field today is a more extensive field, and certainly is a good option for providing nutrition for dry cows through the autumn and into the winter. You do look at a field like this and think there's not a lot of quality here, but what we need to keep in mind is that cattle are actually very selective grazers, so they will select throughout this. When we give them an allowance of this pasture, they will select the good bits out it. We've got some standing straw, some real good fibre, but we've also got some good green grass through it as well. So there's a nice mix, and they'll be able to manipulate their diet and pull out what they really need. We have to keep in mind as well that dry suckler cow doesn't actually really need very much to keep her going anyway. We see it in traditional house systems. We're always restricting silage or having cattle on straw diet. So when we keep that in mind, you look at maintenance of a suckler cow through the winter, and a field like this, providing ground conditions are suitable to carry cattle and we don't cause any environmental issues, there's a great opportunity to get cattle back out into these more marginal and hill areas. We're in southwest Scotland, and we are famed for growing a lot of grass and also having a lot of rain. So we do need to make sure that when we're designing or planning a deferred grazing system, we do have a bit of a plan B in mind, or an area we can go when things aren't quite going to plan, when we're having those extreme weather events, whether it be high rainfall or snow. The paddock or area that we're choosing for deferred grazing, it's important that we have sufficient shelter to basically protect animals from the worst of the weather. When it comes to stocking rate, probably when we're setting out, less is more. Give it a go, put a few cattle in an area and let them eat it off, and through time you'll develop into a system as to where that kind of optimum number of stock is. Historically, on a traditional deferred hill grazing scenario, people would be looking between a cow to 4 acres up to about a cow to 10 acres. So for a ballpark figure, that's for a full winter. So that's from maybe November through to March. It depends where you are, what your ground conditions are, and really it's about you developing that system to suit your animals and to suit your farm and you yourself. What's also important to note is, have you got the right animal for the system? So continental type cows that are used to lying in a straw bed through the winter probably aren't best suited to this. Some people do achieve pretty good performance on that with that type of cow in this environment, but perhaps this is one to look at more of a native type cow and one that suits a lower cost system as well. We also now have the option to bring in bales and operate a bale grazing system. It's becoming increasingly popular, particularly for those who are looking towards a more regenerative approach to farming. Bale grazing, I think, has got a huge potential for many farms across the country, and it just allows us to drive up that stocking rate and control the utilisation of the forage that bit better by deploying a series of bales throughout the deferred grazing site. What you would do is you put them out, you don't haul a bale out every day through the winter, you put them all out through the summer. Often they're left in the field that they were made, and then strip graze those bales off as the winter progresses. Often the limiting factor for deferred grazing is ground conditions, particularly in the southwest where we've got heavier land and higher rainfall. Ground conditions are very much the big challenge, but we can use deferred grazing as an entry for a reseed, so we can almost sacrifice a paddock. We don't want to cause a lot of damage to the paddock, but we can, a little poaching on the surface as an entry to reseed is no bad thing. So there are options on low ground farms that don't have rough areas to make use of deferred grazing. And remember, that deferred grazing might be the thing that buys you a fortnight or 3 weeks in the autumn. It doesn't necessarily need to be a full winter rotation. So this video has just been a wee intro into what deferred grazing is and the opportunities it might present you. We're lucky later in the year to be going to see Giles Hendry, who really is the master of all things deferred grazing. He's farming in the Borders and has been utilising deferred grazing for many years, and we'll go and see him later in the year to see the system in practice and get a few tips from him as well.